I remember Varela saying something that it changed, like there's this few moments in life that you think, okay, this is a moment that changed your life forever. And he said something like, now we know that perceiving is not processing information from outside, but mainly a continuous endogenous creation of our own mental and brain activity that is modulated by this kind of whispers from outside. And that idea was like, wow, okay, I want to study this. And this is where basically that was the moment where I decided to do biology and then studied doing the PhD and all of that. So I have a huge appreciation for this inside out view of the brain. And you mentioned that and you discussed that quite in detail in the book. What is this new metaphor of the brain about, and how can you use it now for explaining or for illuminating what consciousness is?
I haven't seen that interview from Varela. I'd like to see that.
I can send you the link.
Modulated by whispers from the world. That's a very poetic way of putting it. But I think it's basically on point, right? It's there are many different ways to overturn or undermine the sort of naive realism with which we may think about perception as just you open your eyes and the world pours itself into your mind through the transparent windows of the senses, that it's a reading of the world. And it's tempting to think that way because one of the, again, back to phenomenology, one of the phenomenological characteristics of perceptual experience, especially vision, is that it seems real. If I see a red car across the road, the redness seems to be an objective mind-independent property of something out there. That's part of the phenomenology of visual experience, this seeming real. And of course, if we take these properties of phenomenology as being real because they seem real, then it becomes natural to think of perception as a process of reading out what's really there and evaluating perception based on veridicality, on how accurate it is with regard to what's actually there. And this just gets us completely down the wrong path. And not completely wrong, I have to say, because it often gets misunderstood as the claim that nothing exists and our perception has nothing to do with reality. This is obviously nonsense, right? Nothing in what I've said or Varela said, or I think anyone else who talks about this really means that, unless they're a proper idealist. No.
That's Berkeley's.
That's Berkeley. No, this is much more Kant or neo-Kant, that there is a world out there, or whether there is or not is a question for physics, not for neuroscience. But let's take at the classical level, there is a world out there, but what we perceive is never direct access to that world. It's never identical to that world, and to assess it on the basis of whether it is or not is just wrong. So perceptual experience is always a creation, and this idea of perception from the inside out, the term that I use, which I didn't invent, I heard it from Chris Frith, who heard it from someone else, is perception as a controlled hallucination, where the control is just as important as the hallucination. So the mind is generating, the brain mind is generating experiences, but these experiences are reined in, calibrated by, as Varela says, whispers from the world. I think it's beautiful. But of course, there are many ways to unpick this further. So you can think of the brain just having its endogenous activity patterns that roll on, that are then perturbed by signals coming from the world. So this would be a conception of the brain in the space of something like attractor dynamics, where it's just unfolding on its own trajectories, and signals from the world bump it from attractor to attractor, or metastable thing to metastable point. People like Georgi Buzaki, I think, would talk in these terms, the brain from the inside out. The predictive processing view, I think, is a little different. It's not incompatible with that, but it just emphasizes a different mechanistic way of thinking, which is that the brain is continually generating predictions about the causes of sensory signals. It's doing Bayesian inference, or approximating Bayesian inference on the causes of the sensory signals that arrive at the eyes and the ears. The way it achieves this Bayesian inference is to throw out predictions and update these predictions, calibrate these predictions against the sensory data that comes in. So now we have a situation where the sensory signals that come into the brain are indeed calibrating. They are prediction errors that just report the difference between what the brain expects and what it gets at every level. But the perceptual heavy lifting is done by signals flowing from the inside out or the top down. It's the combined ensemble of perceptual predictions about the causes of sensory signals. That, at least on the strong view of predictive processing, that's what we perceive. That carries the content of what we perceive.